crazy part is, BMW didn't treat the Z4 like some side project. So let's look at what BMW threw away here. In 2018, they unveiled the third-generation G29 Z4 at Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. Suffice to say, Pebble Beach is not some random parking lot. It's one of the most prestigious automotive stages in the world. And then things get weird, because the Z4 ended up sharing its platform with the fifth-generation Toyota Supra. Yeah, the Supra J29. Now ask yourself this question. If the platform was good enough to revive one of the most legendary Japanese sports cars ever made, why wasn't it worth saving for BMW? And trust me, once you trace the history of the Z-series from the beginning, you start realizing the Z4 wasn't just another BMW roadster. It was one of the last reminders of what BMW used to be. And honestly, that's the first sign BMW may have underestimated the Z4, because cars with Toyota Supra-level engineering underneath them don't usually disappear. See, the predecessor, the Z3, came from a time when BMW still cared more about how a car made you feel. To me, that's character. And trust me, that becomes very important later in the Z4 story. Because when the Z3 showed up in the 90s, BMW wasn't out here trying to build the fastest car on the planet. They built a small rear-wheel drive roadster centered around simplicity, balance, and personality. And somehow, people connected with that. I mean, think about this. BMW placed the Z3 in a James Bond movie before most customers had even seen one at a dealership. That tells you everything. Back then, BMW genuinely believed cars like this represented the brand. But then they went a step further. They built the Z3 Coupe. And let's be honest, that car looked weird. So weird, people started calling it the clown shoe almost immediately. But that is exactly why the car mattered. Because modern BMW would probably bury a design like that in a PowerPoint presentation before it ever reached production. But back then, BMW still had the guts to build enthusiast cars that didn't need everyone's approval to exist. And honestly, I think the Z3 proved something important. People didn't fall in love with that car because it was practical. They fell in love with it because it had character. But boy, the Z1 screamed freedom. Freedom to experiment. Because the Z1 didn't feel like a normal BMW at all. It came out of a special division called BMW Technik, where engineers were basically told to stop playing it safe. And honestly, they went completely off script. The doors disappeared into the body. The body panels could be removed and replaced. And instead of chasing crazy horsepower numbers, BMW focused on lightweight engineering, balance, and pure driver feel. Only around 8,000 were ever built. But here's the thing, that car was never supposed to be some mass-market blockbuster. The Z1 existed to push boundaries, to see what happened when engineers were allowed to think outside the box. And honestly, I miss that version of BMW. The version willing to build strange, risky enthusiast cars, without obsessing over whether they perfectly fit the market, because somewhere along the way, BMW slowly lost that freedom. But hold on a second. If you and I can clearly see what BMW is losing by ending the Z4, surely BMW sees it too, right? The freedom to experiment, the character of the Z-series, the willingness to build cars that didn't always follow the crowd. Because if you look at the third-generation Z cars, especially the Z4, you can still see traces of all those ideas surviving. And that is what makes the Z4 story so fascinating. Because BMW didn't discontinue some random forgotten sports car. They ended one of the last cars still carrying the original Z philosophy into the modern era. And once you realize that, the Z4 stopping production starts feeling a lot less like a normal business decision and a lot more like the end of an era. For me, the Z4 represented resistance. Resistance against where the car industry was heading. Because while the industry chased bigger screens, heavier platforms, EVs, and SUV profits, the Z4 kept fighting for the old-school sports car formula. Long hood, rear-wheel drive, low seating position, and a driving experience that still prioritized connection over isolation. Even the third-generation G29 carried traces of that same DNA. This was a car important enough to share its its platform with the Toyota Supra, which tells you the engineering underneath the Z4 was never the problem. But eventually, the tide started turning. Emission rules tightened, EV investment exploded, and low-volume enthusiast cars slowly became dinosaurs watching the asteroid approach. And that is what BMW lost when the Z4 disappeared. One of the last modern BMWs still resisting the industry's shift away from pure driver-focused cars. Personally, I think the E86 Z4 M Coupé represented pure BMW. Like, this was BMW before filters. And trust me, that becomes very important later in the story. Because when I look at the E86, I don't see a car built to impress casual buyers. I see a car built for people who genuinely love driving. Hydraulic steering, a manual gearbox only, and that legendary S54 inline-six from the E86 M3 sitting under the hood. This thing was raw. The steering felt alive. The engine practically begged you to push it harder. And honestly, I think BMW knew cars like this were becoming a dying breed. Because when the E86 disappeared, I don't think BMW just lost a coupe. I think they lost a huge piece of their mechanical soul. Then the Z4 changed. And honestly, I think the E89 represented compromise. Not necessarily in a bad way, but you could clearly feel BMW trying to adapt to a changing market. They gave the car a folding hardtop, a quieter cabin, more luxury, and a smoother grand touring personality. And look, I get why BMW did it. People wanted more comfort, more technology, cars that felt easier to live with every day. But at the same time, you could already feel the Z4 moving further away from that raw, old-school character. And honestly, I think the E89 was the moment BMW slowly started trading purity for survival. But then came the G29 Z4 M40i manual. And honestly, to me, that car represented resistance. Because by that point, the automotive industry had already changed completely. SUVs were printing money. EV development became the priority, and most manufacturers had already abandoned compact enthusiast roadsters altogether. But somehow, BMW still gave the Z4 a turbocharged inline-six, rear-wheel drive, and eventually a manual gearbox. And that right there tells me something important. BMW clearly knew cars like this still mattered to enthusiasts. So then why kill the Z-series? And honestly, I think the answer is painfully simple. Cars like the Z4 stopped making sense in a market chasing scale, electrification, emissions targets, and high-volume platforms. In other words, the industry slowly stopped rewarding cars built purely for the love of driving. And the craziest part? People appreciated the G29 the most when BMW announced production was ending. Almost like everyone suddenly realized what they were about to lose. Because once the Z4 disappeared, BMW didn't just lose a roadster. They lost one of the last modern cars still fighting for the old driving philosophy. And as for a Z successor, honestly, with the industry moving toward EVs and stricter emissions rules, I wouldn't hold my breath. But hey, if you enjoyed this story, you should definitely watch my BMW i8 video right here.